Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. My name is Olumuyiwa Matuluko. Welcome to the month of May. Yes, May, the month of the annual tax conference. Have you packed your bags? It promises to be a very exciting time in Abuja. On today's episode of Tax Matters, we're going to be looking at two issues. Do we have multiplicity of taxes in Nigeria? Do we have, or why do we have multiple governmental agencies breathing down the necks of taxpayers? If you recall very well, about 2 episodes ago, we shared with you proceedings of the 2018 KPMG Chief Financial Officers Forum, and these two issues were highlighted by Mr. Tola Adeyemi.
When we sit with CFOs, all of them say to us that at the end of the day, they recognize that companies and individuals must pay taxes, and we must pay fair taxes. One of the key issues was the whole question of multiplicity of taxes, and I would say some sense of confusion around who is really in charge here. The question is, the multiplicity of agencies chasing taxes.
With regard to the first issue, multiplicity of taxes, this was addressed by Mr. Fowler at another forum earlier in the year.
A lot of people talk about multiple taxation. It has become such a topic. But I can assure you that in Nigeria, we do not have multiple taxation. Multiple taxation only arises when you pay the same tax to 2 tiers of government. A lot of businesses mistake user charges, penalties, levies, fines, and call them taxation. And in quite a number of cases, we'll find out that if we look at the legal taxes that are to be charged by each tier of government, there's really no organization that will pay more than 5 to 6 taxes. And when we look at the most popular ones, if you run a corporate organization, you pay corporate income tax. If you have staff, they're under the pay scheme. The payment on their income is not a charge to you, but is a charge to the worker. And then what other taxes do you really pay? You pay VAT, which is common to everybody. You pay withholding tax, which is an advance tax to your credit. So that if you have a government job and they deduct withholding tax, you can actually claim that tax as part of your tax due for that year. So really, when we look at it, I'm talking to the men and women who run the Nigerian economy here. So when we look at it, how many taxes do we really pay?
Yes, indeed. There is some confusion about the differences between taxes, levies, fines, and charges. There is also some confusion regarding the obligations of individuals and corporate bodies to the different levels of government. But surely, we must pay to have our refuse picked. We must pay to park our vehicles in central business districts of our cities. That was at the February 2018 edition of the Members' Evening of the Institute of Directors, Nigeria. At the KPMG Chief Financial Officers Forum, where the issues were raised, Mr. Babatunde Fowler addressed the issue of multiple governmental agencies chasing after taxpayers.
Who are the real tax administrators? Is it the EFCC? Is it the Ministry of Finance? Is it the Ministry of Justice? Is it ICPC? And was it RAMFAC? And what has happened is that during a FAC meeting, some issues were brought up which bordered on non-remittance, mainly of withholding tax, VAT. And those are taxes or revenue that are shared between 3 tiers of government. On the VAT level, 85% of that goes to the states, 15% goes to the federal government. But when it comes to withholding tax, It is shared between all three tiers. And it was brought to the notice of that meeting where FIS is a member that especially a number of banks were holding on to VAT, were holding on to withholding tax, and were not remitting the same. And at that meeting, it was decided that RAMFAC should look into it. Now, during that period, over 10 billion naira was found not to have been remitted. Last year, 22 billion naira of withholding tax was found not to have been remitted. When a taxpayer who applies for a tax clearance is not given one and finds out that he did a job for a state government, did a job for a multinational, did a job even for a local business, withholding taxes were deducted, it was expected that at the end, before the end of the next month, those taxes should have been remitted on behalf of that contractor, so that when he's filing his returns, he has withholding tax credits. But when he doesn't have them, he's at liberty and has the right to report to the FCC, which deals with economic crimes, or report to FIRS, or report to other agencies of government. And so they do get involved at that level when they do receive notification of non-remittance of those funds.
To return to the matter at hand, why do we have several governmental agencies collaborating in ensuring that every kobo of taxes is collected? On the 10th of April 2018, Mr. Babatunde Fowler led a high-powered delegation of FIRS officials to the headquarters of the EFCC in Abuja. At that event, Mr. Fowler shed more light on the collaboration and the support that the FIRS is receiving from the EFCC.
We have had a very good working relationship over the past few years, and especially the past few months in particular. And where we have found ourselves at a crossroad when it comes to tax payments, we have found an able partner in the FCC. In the last 3 months ago, with the operation, we were able to help us generate or collect 28 billion from the financial sector. But I'm happy to say that at times when some of these tax defaulters, who sometimes are involved in criminal activities, are invited to your office. I don't know how you do it, but we see results, and we would like to just appreciate those results that we get on behalf of the nation, on behalf of FIRS also. And during the period when you were actually investigating on our behalf the withholding tax from the financial institution, 1 or 2 banks actually came on their own and paid substantial amounts. So I think they must have heard the word going around and decided to come forward themselves. So I think I comply. So if this is the way it has to be for now, we'll appreciate more support.
Tax dodgers, beware. In response, the chairman of the EFCC, Malam Ibrahim Magu, pledged the continuing support of the EFCC.
You have changed the narrative in the tax commission. I mean, there is no doubt that there is a great improvement in the tax commission. And I want to assure you that we will collaborate. We will make sure that anybody who is here will find out whether he has been paying his tax and show us evidence that he has been also remitting his tax and all that. We will do whatever you need us to do that is lawful. We will collaborate with you. We will encourage you to do more. We will also ask you to support us in fighting corruption. I mean, let everybody be involved. This is a task that everybody, we are all stakeholders. And I believe every Nigerian has a responsibility in the fight against corruption.
Welcome once again. Still talking about pursuing tax dodgers. On the 12th of April 2018, 2 days after the FIRS visit to the EFCC headquarters, a delegation from the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC, led by Professor Isse Sage, came calling at Revenue House in Abuja. Welcoming the PACA committee, Mr. Batunde Fowler spoke about efforts made by his administration to sanitize the tax administration system in Nigeria.
And people normally refer to us as the revenue agency of the federal government, but in fact, we're the revenue agency for the nation, because what we collect in the Federation account is shared between the three tiers of government. So we've seen ourselves perform this very important task, but we have reviewed ourselves internally, first of all. And we looked inwards and we said the first thing that we would do is to change our orientation, change our vision. We found out that our staff do have certain weaknesses. They were not trained for quite a while. And so we decided to throw open most positions to staff to bid for. We first of all started off with the tax controllers. Instead of the office of the chairman appointing people to certain positions, we said let the best people come forward, and those people will be the ones that will first of all be given the opportunity. So we threw it open for staff who think they've got the skill and the personality and also share our vision to bid for the position of tax controllers. And so we changed the face of tax controllers across the nation. We also asked staff to bid for the position of Commissioner of Stamp Duty. We also threw the issue of audit open to all staff. And that is where we found out a number of staff had been alleged to have been corrupt in that function. A few of them were found culpable, and of course we did remove them. But we also threw it open to staff, and we added a little condition. They had to pass a test so that we are sure that they have the competence. So any error that is made on the field, we know it's an issue of corruption and not incompetence. We've also found out that we don't have enough staff. So we did partner with some consultants to carry out this audit process, but we are putting a number of checks and balances. And in our first review of 200, what we call national audit cases, unfortunately, we found out that not one was compliant. Prior to now, our staff used to rely on self-assessments, and we had audit teams that used to go out and carry out the audits. But then, in not trying to condemn our staff, and that's why I said we looked at an issue of incompetence or compromise. But since we started this new process, we have seen that our audit figures has been growing up, and some cases, the major names, because when I say 200 national audits, none of them were compliant. Somebody will wonder what happened. So some of them was an issue of tax policy. Some of them was an issue of tax calculations, let me put it that way. But on the new step, everybody is alive to the fact that we have a new way of doing things. We had situations whereby our staff at the level of the station, which are the tax controllers, were able to issue tax lien certificates. And we found out at one particular time in doing a review, we had over 42,000 nil tax lien certificates, meaning that corporate organizations who applied for tax lien certificates declared for the last 3 years, they didn't make any income and paid no tax. And we found that extremely strange. What we've done now is that only the state coordinators, which are about 15 of them, if the taxpayer goes through the manual process, only 15 staff can sign off on tax lien certificates. And that has dropped the nil tax lien certificates tremendously. So only people who have met or that met that conditions to get a nil tax lien certificate for 3 years are issued, while others are not issued tax lien certificates. So the taxpayer has two options, either to go online or to go the manual process, and that manual process now has more checks and balances in the system.
On collaboration with governmental agencies like the Presidential Advisory Committee,
we also have a relationship with other anti-graft agencies, especially the FCC, ICPC, and other organs of government where we exchange information. We paid a courtesy call on the FCC this week. We had a situation with the banking sector where they failed to remit withholding tax on dividend. And they're able to help us collect 29 billion, mainly from the banking institutions alone. So we do have also a very good working relationship with the police force, the NIA, NFIU, and on intelligence gathering. And I think taxpayers in general have seen this new approach, or maybe new effective approach. Because for some time, we found out that in 2015, 2014, the FIRS hardly went on this train, hardly effected any legal actions on tax defaulters. But I think people are seeing things a bit different now.
It all goes to show how tax administration in Nigeria has gone up several notches. Believe us, there's no more hiding place for the tax dodger. Responding, Professor Sage had this to say.
We've come in solidarity with the work you are doing. We've come to learn, to have more knowledge, and from what you've presented now, our knowledge of your work has increased tremendously. A lot of work is being done, a lot of change to improve our system of taxation is clearly going on.
On the voluntary assets and income declaration scheme,
we hope that from this step, very, very progressive step, we might go on to what is happening in the UK today, this question of unexplained wealth orders, because a lot of people either own assets in terms of buildings, in terms of shares in companies, in terms of money in banks, and so on, which they do not declare, of which nobody has any knowledge. What I would suggest, in addition to what you are doing here, is that the CAC should now be compelled to compile the beneficiaries of company in person, not in all these names, company names, and various deceitful terminologies. One other point that I think I should make is that I find the tax net too narrow in Nigeria, very, very narrow. We are very few in the tax net. The tendency has been to come again and again and again to these few people, increase their taxes, regardless of obviously reduced income. I mean, someone getting on in age cannot work as hard as he used to. What is happening today is that if you paid a certain amount of income tax this year, it is assumed that next year it will be assumed that you earn more, and nobody looks at declining capacity. There should be more vigor in bringing in a lot of people who are not paying tax. Many of them may be artisans, small people, but if all their little drops of water are added to what is already being collected, I think we shall have a very, very large income for the whole country to be able to expend on the responsibilities of government.
Other members of the Presidential Advisory Committee made observations and sought clarifications, and Mr. Fowler responded accordingly. All these will come to you in the next episode of Tax Matters. Commendation, pledges of support all over the place. We must say that the giant strides being made by the FIRS are not going unnoticed. At the 2017 edition of the annual dinner and award ceremony of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN, FIRS won the Merit Award in the corporate category. At the 2018 edition of the annual dinner and awards held on Saturday, the 28th of April 2018, Mr. Babatunde Fowler won the Merit Award of the Institute in the non-member category. At the same event, the Honorable Federal Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, won the ICANN Merit Award for 2018 in the members category. The the two distinguished award winners were chosen to speak on behalf of all other awardees at the event.
Let me first of all state, for us to receive an award from a group such as ICANN is extremely humbling. I'm also delighted to be able to give this response on behalf of the corporate organizations because they play a very vital role. And my good friend, the owner promoter of Dangote, I'm glad to say is one of the more compliant companies that we have in Nigeria supporting this economy. And in terms of others who are also showing service, the hospitals and other corporate organizations, one thing that they all have in common is a desire to serve this nation, to make this nation greater. And as a tax administrator, I'd just like to thank all taxpayers here present, both members and non-members of ICANN, and to say together, we will make Nigeria great again.
Let me also recognize the presence of my professional mother and the first female chartered accountant in Africa, Chief Mrs. Toyin Olakuri, who is here with us. Thank you, Ma. I'm here today because you were here. If you didn't do what you did then, we wouldn't be here today. So on behalf of all the female chartered accountants, I want to really thank you. And we hope we can make you proud. On behalf of all the awardees, the members of ICANN, my humble self, and my Kabiesi, the Akaribo of Remo Land, I'd like to say thank you so much to the Institute for deeming us worthy to be recipients of these awards. In Nigeria, we like awards, all kinds of awards, but when you get an award from ICANN, it's actually a very, very valuable and very, very well-respected honor. But I think it's significant that we're honoring the taxman. And when the taxman's name is mentioned, people clap. That's a sea change in Nigeria that I think is here to stay.
Tax Matters had a brief chat with Mr. Fowler. Sir, what does this award mean to you?
Well, in terms of an award from ICANN, which is a very reputable organization, it shows that they have keyed into the vision that we have as tax administrators.
From all of us at Tax Matters, big congratulations to Mrs. Adeosun and to Mr. Fowler. We are proud of you. Let's wrap up this episode of Tax Matters by reminding all of you about the 20th edition of the annual tax conference holding in Abuja between Tuesday the 8th and Friday the 11th of May 2018. Let us whet your appetite. see you in Abuja and see you on this program next week. The beat certainly goes on. Have a blessed week ahead and have a safe trip to Abuja.